Can you tell us, was there like a watershed moment that happened recently that actually propelled all this advance in generative AI?
Is
Why
in a
was it
way
not?
one AI to rule them all. So imagine that the same AI can fulfill a lot of tasks, including tasks that it was never designed to even solve. Now, so the average American family would have $15,000 to $20,000 more in income every year.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Tech Banter. My name is Ankur Datta. I'm a tech professional based out of Seattle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vishal. I'm a software engineer in a big tech company, and I'm also based in Seattle. So today we have a very special guest with us, uh, Eden Cohen. Please welcome Eden Cohen to the Tech Banter. Eden, why don't you give a small introduction about yourself?
Okay, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Ankur. Thank you, Vishal, for inviting me here. It's a pleasure. I've been following your work for a while and really enjoy it. So, I'm also from the Seattle area. That's where Vishal and I met and even worked together for a little bit. I am currently at Google. I do product management, but originally I'm from Israel. This is where I grew up, studied, spent a decade or so of my career. And going back a little, so like most people in tech, I've been into it for as long as I'm alive, pretty much. I was fascinated by calculators when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. That was in the mid 80s or something. Um, and my parents had an easy time because they didn't need to read me books or put me in front of a TV. I was kind of perfectly happy with that Texas Instruments calculator, which I think had these red LED light displays. And, at the time, this was as close as we had at home to a computer. So it kept me perfectly engaged for a little bit. By the way, I still keep at my desk
Oh, nice.
Wow.
this thing. So this one
Oh
I got
my.
when I was 13 years old. It just or 14. It just hit the market. This is a TI 92 calculator, and I was counting the days until I had enough money to buy this thing. It was pretty expensive back then, like $300 or something.
Yeah.
And I worked my way to it, and that kept me so engaged into math and all that stuff. So I was a nerd, as you can tell. Um,
Yeah.
but I officially got into the tech industry a little after that. That was in 2006. My first role was an engineering role at Intel. And back then, just to show you how the times have changed, so as a computer science undergrad, Intel was literally, at least for me, but I know for others too, was the dream company to work for,
Wow.
both because it was cutting edge back then, and it was the one company that blended the hardware and software worlds together in a way that very few others did. So I was there for 7 years. I was a developer. Later, I led some teams that worked on firmware and other kind of low-level x86 PC stuff, and learning from really great engineers, both the technical merits of the engineering craft and the know-how and disciplines that come with being part of this multinational corporation that has to ship a billion chips a year on schedule, year after year. And as I was doing all that stuff, I was gaining some managerial experience, also doing an MBA, and that opened my mind and attracted me more and more into the business side of tech. And to me, product management was that perfect balance between the passion for tech, the love for the product, and then being a central hub to the kind of overall business. So, exactly 10 years ago, September 2013, this was the golden age for smartphones, where the growth was the highest and the hype was maybe at its peak. And that's when I switched sides, moving to Intel's then greatest rival, which was Qualcomm. Spent 6 years there doing product management for their mobile chips. Got a lot of got to, I guess, put into practice much of what I learned in business school. Visited and done business in 2 dozen countries or so with Qualcomm, and ended up living in California. And after that, I spent a few years at Microsoft, moving to the Pacific Northwest, which is, of course, the home of Microsoft. Got to be part and launch several innovative cloud computing services. And fast forward to now, for the past year and a half, I've been with Google's Devices and Services group, where one of my key responsibilities, I guess, is to help productize AI features and capabilities in a way that's safe, secure, and trustworthy.
For our listeners, today we will be diving deep into a specific AI topic, that is generative economy, and we are going to discuss about how to prepare and be relevant in this AI driven economy. So, by the way, Eden, if you know, on Tech Banter we have a small tradition. We all bring a drink to the podcast. So Ankur, I will start with Ankur today. Ankur, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking a orange based soda, so
Awesome.
nothing special.
Cool. With me, I think I have a very old drink. This is Jack Daniel with a Coke.
Classic,
Ooh.
always.
What I got is this ancient mushroom elixir.
Oh,
That's
Okay.
a raw organic drink, and it has these made with an infusion of mushrooms. So it has this adaptogenic property, which is supposedly, these natural substances that do all sorts of wonderful things like increased energy and improved focus and better
Wow.
immunity, according to some studies. So this one also has a dose of matcha green tea. It's very good.
guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers. Yeah.
Um, so, Eden, can you explain to the listeners what is generative AI and what is generative AI driven economy? Like in a simple layman terms.
Yeah, let's try it and tell me if I'm being too simple or not. Happy to course correct. And I know you've touched on generative AI on this podcast, but to go with a kind of simple definition, AI has been around for 50 or 60 years. AI is not a new thing. 10 years ago, there was a type of breakthrough where the approach of doing AI using neural networks, which is one approach, really started to take off. And AI penetrated our lives, but in very narrow areas, very specific things. So we all know AI can help us search images or classify images by the objects or people in those images, right? AI can be used to help banks decide what mortgages to approve based on the various properties and instances of other mortgages that it was essentially trained on. So very specific tasks. AI can essentially look at input and then decide from a few options what's the right option, predict what will happen based on the input. So that's non-generative AI, and that's the AI that's been proliferating for about a decade now. What generative AI does is it's no longer, so it has two, I think, really fascinating properties. One is it is general. So it is, in a way, one AI to rule them all. So imagine that the same AI can fulfill a lot of tasks, including tasks that it was never designed to even solve. So every task that I told you, like describing a mortgage, a property, and asking it, do you think, based on this data, that this mortgage can be paid off? A generative AI should be able to do a decent job at that. Maybe not as good as an AI trained exactly for that, but it is able to do all sorts of tasks. The other thing is that the output from generative AI is extremely flexible. So the output could be writing an article, start to finish. The output can be generating an image. And I think you showed Midjourney in the past, right? So it could be that. It could be generating audio. It could be generating video. It could be generating anything that a human being will generate. At least for now, it's in the virtual space. So we're not talking about constructing a table, but anything that you can do on a computer, generative AI can do on a computer, including writing code. So this is a huge, huge, monumental breakthrough. Overnight, we gain these two abilities, work on any sort of task, and generate any sort of output. It's like unheard of. And one of the reasons why we think, or many experts believe that this is possible, is that we spent the first 50 years of AI trying to teach it things that are very easy for people, like vision or navigating in a physical space. These are things that we've evolved for hundreds of thousands of years and in doing. We've done them forever. Our primates do them. Every type of mammal does them. And so maybe we've gotten really, really good at them comparatively. But it is the hard tasks that we didn't really focus on. So the hard tasks are things like reading comprehension. We've only been doing reading for a few thousands of years, if even that. And it turns out that we thought these tasks are hard. Well, they're hard for us, but it turns out they're not so hard for the AI. So this is, in a nutshell, the idea behind generative AI.
Got it. Yeah. So I think one thing that comes to my mind is like, what is so different this time, right? Like, we have seen many breakthroughs coming along. I think you touch based saying the input and output both can be like abstract at this point, right? Can you give us a little bit more detail about what is so different this time, and is it going into a hype or a bubble mode, Eden?
Yeah. So there is a lot of hype. But this time, I think, unlike with crypto, maybe, I do believe the hype is justified. I'm not hearing many experts thinking otherwise. So why is it, in fact, so different? The reason is that it has the potential to disrupt a lot of jobs. Start with that, okay? So, for example, people who produce content, written content, for instance, marketers, advertisers, authors, journalists, reporters. It turns out that AI, or generative AI, from now on, I'll just talk about generative AI. So when I say AI, assume it's that. Turns out that AI can do all of that very effectively, often better than most people can do it. And even if you still need the reporter to talk to people to collect evidence, the task of producing the report can be cut down in time dramatically. Now, this is great. It's great for productivity if we can achieve the same things or even better things with less time. But it's happening so quickly and so effectively that one concern is that we will just need far fewer marketers, far fewer advertisers, far fewer data analysts, and so on and so forth, far fewer programmers, maybe, simply because people can become so much more productive so much more quickly that we won't need as many of them. And in a recessionary environment, which we might be facing soon, companies will not hire, because that's what happens in most recessions. Companies will look for where they can squeeze out efficiencies, where they can improve productivity. And all of a sudden, you have this incredible toolkit of tools that can help every type of sort of white-collar job become more productive overnight. So you start seeing less productive employees being replaced by these AIs. So a lot of jobs require people to read documents, right? Now imagine if instead of reading a long document, spending hours on it, you can see a summary of the document and spend minutes instead of hours. So not only do you spend less time, but you're probably focusing on the things that you really need to be focusing on in the first place. Or AI, Gen AI, can do a great job at finding and identifying flaws in documents, logical flaws, factual flaws. That's something that humans used to be the only creatures capable of doing. AI can do that very well. If you are a maker, a creator working with graphics or 3D modeling, you could do rapid prototyping just by using natural language to tell the AI what the model needs to be. And if you don't like it, then you just iterate and tell it, oh no, this should be a different shape, this should be a different color. And immediately you get the output of that instead of sending it to a different department and 2 days later seeing the model. You could, if you're a researcher, you could do experiment planning, which means that the AI can come up with hypotheses. It can identify promising areas for follow-on experiments. In medicine and pharma, we can see already drugs being invented, or drug discovery and molecules being dramatically sped up using AI. Protein design, which is basically how
Yeah.
to fold the protein into a specified shape. All these things across so many knowledge areas, AI can do an amazingly good job.
You explained what generative AI is. Can you tell us, was there like a watershed moment that happened recently that actually propelled all this advance in generative AI? Why was it not possible like 10 years back, but in the last 5 to 3 years that this advancement happened?
Yeah, so today's generative AI requires three things really, and all of these three things didn't exist 10 years ago. So the first is you need a lot of compute power, because you are dealing with a lot of training data and very, very large neural networks. And 10 years ago, sure, we had GPUs, which are the accelerators of the AI training and inferencing process. But today, with Moore's Law and other advances, not just in the silicon technology, but also in hardware architectures, we have vastly more and superior compute power. Just to give you an idea, the latest generation of NVIDIA GPUs is about 3 times more powerful than the previous one of just 2 years ago. So, I mean, it's continuing to accelerate rapidly. That's been critical, the compute. The second thing is the data. Today, at least with these large language models, they only become really, really good when you start training them on hundreds of billions of words or tokens. Now, to have, and this has to be like different words, different styles, different sources, and so on. This is essentially trained on the internet today. We train it on all the publicly available data and some private and copyrighted materials. But if you go back to 2010, the size of the internet was simply too small to generate a large model from it. And GPT-2, for example, which was trained just about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, is crap compared to GPT-3. And the main difference was that it was trained on a smaller data set. And because there was less compute dedicated to it, the size of the model was smaller. But the result is that not only it doesn't know as much, but it doesn't have nearly as many skills as the follow-on, which was GPT-3. So data is really important, and the internet has been exponentially rising by double-digit percentage every year. And only in the last few years, it got large enough for us to have enough training material to train these very sophisticated models. And the last thing is the know-how or the methodology. So having the compute and the data is great, but to take data, feed it into GPUs, and come up with a model, how do you do it? Like, there is an algorithm to doing this, right? And the algorithm only emerged. So we've had like a gradual or an evolutionary rise in how we do deep neural networks, but what enables these foundation models really only came in 2017. So this was a seminal paper published by Google Research called "Attention is All You Need." And up until then, we had language models, even relatively large ones, But they used a different architecture that was called recurrent neural networks. In fact, if you open up the keyboard on your smartphone, if it has like a prediction for the next word, that is a language model, but it uses a recurrent neural network. And the problem with recurrent neural networks, to kind of really simplify it, is they work sequentially and they only look back kind of a few words or sentences. They struggle when it comes to long range associations between words. So if you need to understand how what is said in this paragraph connects to what was said 2 pages ago, RNNs are not good enough at this. So in 2017, this new transformer architecture, this introduced a concept of self-attention, and this allows the model to really capture and utilize contextual information much, much more effectively, and to do the training in parallel, which is wonderful for the type of data centers and GPUs that we have. So it's highly parallelizable, lets you compute different elements in the sequence and do that in parallel. So much more effective on modern training hardware. And the result is the models using transformers are just much smarter, if you will, much more intelligent than the previous one. So 2017 was that watershed moment, but it took a few more years for OpenAI, to be fair, I think, maybe some others too, but OpenAI, definitely one of the leaders there, to say, we believe this thing really has the potential. Let's devote millions of dollars into training a neural network using the transformer architecture with all this data that we can scour, gather from the internet and see what happens. And it took a few iterations, but with GPT-3, which I think came out in 2020, they were really onto something.
Generative AI is actually disrupting a lot of the white collar jobs or knowledge work as we know it. Um I feel like what happened with industrial automation or robotics and how it,
It
yeah,
could.
a lot of the white collar workers now with generative AI.
Yeah, it could. I think so. We have to remember that even within a company that can benefit from generative AI, and even within a team of professionals that all have the same job, there are going to be differences. There are going to be people who will be more vulnerable to displacement by AI and people who are less vulnerable. Because remember, for now, at least Gen AI cannot sit down for a one-on-one with people, cannot just get grasp of the latest rumors or have a conversation over the proverbial water fountain. So it's complicated. I don't think AI can be useful, I think, for almost anyone right now, even in its current shape. But I'm not sure AI can displace everyone. That is still, for the time being, a far cry from reality, at least for most white collar jobs. But we do have what we said as the, well, even if AI doesn't replace somebody, you might need fewer of that profession. That is one kind of risk. The other thing that's going on, and I think that's equally important, is look, if we can be more productive, that would be a wonderful thing for the economy. For the past 15 years or so, let's look at America specifically. So between the end of the Second World War and about 2005, what economists call the labor productivity, which is a measure of year over year, how much more productive are employees becoming? That's been about 2.5% until 2005. So on average, if somebody could produce $100 of worth of economic value in a day in 1980, then in 1981 that was $102.50. Let's adjusted to inflation. So the economy was really becoming more and more productive. 2.5% a year, that, as you know, amounts to a lot over 60 years.
Yeah.
But ever since 2005, and partly to blame for this, I think, is the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, it went down to 1.4% or so. Now, that's just a little over 1%. But what it means today is if we kept the 2.5% a year from 2005 until now, the average American family would have $15,000 to $20,000 more in income every year.
Hmm.
Every year. So we really need that boost in productivity. And these numbers that I'm sharing, they're roughly true for all developed economies. So like productivity growth has been tanking. And nobody really knows why, but it's clear that we sort of need another technological wave. And
Hmm.
this could be that wave. So I think lots of promise there. Because if we need fewer people to do the same job, these people might be redirected to other parts of the economy where we just don't have enough resources to improve our quality of life.
What are the big examples that you have for current generative AI that is happening in the economy? Like, I think you mentioned images, text. Are there like more other examples that you have seen or you know about them?
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot going on, but for now, it's in about 4 or 5 different areas. I think it will grow to 10 or 20 quite soon. But for now, where we see a lot of generative AI already is marketing. A lot of
Mhm.
product marketing uses generative AI. In fact, if you go to product listings on e-commerce websites, good chance half of them have been written using generative AI. And not only that, so Amazon, for example, are actively working, and I think they're already doing it. They are scanning product listings. They are using generative AI to decide if some listings are low quality. So
Hmm.
maybe the product isn't well described, maybe it's missing some information, etc. And they're using generative AI to fill in the blanks, basically. So every
Oh,
product
nice.
on Amazon has metadata. So if you're selling
Hmm.
shoes, what size is the shoe, what materials it is made of, etc., etc. A lot of these properties. But some of them, the sellers don't provide the information. So when you search for them, you might not see the product, for example. So you're already seeing Gen AI used by both platforms and by people using these platforms for products and marketing. Media is another very, very hot area right now, the media space, news. So faster content development workflows, automated articles. Now, of course, every now and then you see a funny headline somewhere. Uh, Probably not on the New York Times, but like tier three media. A lot of these things are now generated by AI, especially when it's about Reuters are publishing something and this media outlet wants to be able to include it in their summary on top of latest news. So they will use Gen AI to do this instantaneously. Customer engagement is a huge thing, and everything to do with support, especially in the form of bots. So Q&A, you want to inquire about information for a certain product. We've been using a chat interface for a while, but for the most part, it was either very stupid because it used a simple AI, which was super limited in what it understood and was able to produce, or you had to wait for minutes for a customer representative to come online. And even that was very, very slow because the same person probably had to engage in 30 chats at once. So you have that aspect too. And for the tech space, code generation tools like GitHub Copilot,
Hmm.
for instance. So programming is easier, writing Q&A, unit tests is much
Yeah.
easier. Doing UI design is easier. I mean, the examples are everywhere, and I think the software industry is facing this massive disruption. What do you guys feel as people who engage in software for a
I
living?
I will back your thought on the generation, the Copilot code generation. I think it is improving day by day, right? And it is not improving linearly; it is improving exponentially. To be honest, in December 2022, I tried ChatGPT to write a small snippet, and I was not at all happy with it. I will tell you. But um, now, if I go and I have tried this in month of May, June, it is like now I can talk to it like a very sophisticated developer. To be honest, right?
uh, in my previous company, which was a startup, there was a huge push from like top leadership to make sure that we were constantly using Copilot. Every developer got a license to use Copilot. There were like multiple sessions done by somebody who tried out Copilot and how you can like leverage the power of Copilot to the max. So yeah, like and I saw it in action. It's like an autocomplete for a developer. It's not at a great quality right now, but it's improving every day. So
Yeah.
the future is going to be interesting. It can I don't know, like I'm sure it's going to disrupt a lot of programming jobs or
Yeah.
tech related software jobs that we have today. So how do you guys feel about that? How it's going
The
to
disruption
disrupt
part.
jobs? Yeah.
The disruption part. Okay, I have a very strong opinion about this disruption part. One thing is, current at its current state, AI as it stands, it can do generative work, but it cannot do the full implementation work. So when we talk about products, features, first of all, I cannot give my whole code base. I have like 10,000 files of code base, right? I cannot make an AI to train on that right now as it stands, until unless I do a full customization of writing a separate tool to give all this code, right? The second thing is, the generation that comes out, it is more of an advice rather than the implementation, end-to-end design implementation of the feature, right? So I think it is doing like a small chunk of work. I think it is doing a very good job at the advisory part of it, right? uh, so disruption as it stands today, we will see the productivity and the pay difference a lot, but not the replacement.
So I think very interesting what you both say. One of the theories that I tend to accept as being the most likely is that if you look ahead 5 years, let's say, even if developers become two times, three times more productive, and I realize that it still has limitations, it doesn't fully grok the scope of a large project and all the dependencies, but even if that were to be addressed, and I think it is a matter of a year or two until that too is addressed. The backlog that software companies have of features, improvements, technical debt, all the problems that are never addressed because there is always too much work, not enough people. That backlog, that will be the opportunity to start working on the backlog. There's still a lot of antiquated critical systems, software systems throughout the economy. Airlines are running on systems from 40 years ago. Banks are running on mainframes from 70 years ago. There's still a lot of COBOL code that's stitching
Yeah.
together critical infrastructure. There's a lot of things that if we only had the capacity to do, the resources, the time to do, we would be able and would love to see done all across all sorts of industries. So I think for the next few years, there is no shortage of work for software engineers. Maybe certain things will be much easier to achieve, but there is so much more that we should go back to and work on. So I'm not sure if the disruption will harm these types of jobs so quickly, or even if it does, one job might close, two others will open. So for the time being, I don't think it's a risky job to be a software person. But 5 or 10 years from now, I think all bets are off, because if AI becomes a self-improving thing, or AI can start deciding what needs to be done and then doing it and then testing it and then deploying it, basically if that entire life cycle of a software product gets taken over by AI, then I think we're facing a different reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I want to touch base a small topic on this, Eden. What do you think of singularity? Is it, can we, I know earlier we used to think it is very far away.
Mhm.
With this generative AI, when I say singularity, I'm not talking about everything to the singularity, but at least from the parts of career growth and job market.
So I think one of the most telling signs of this is if you look 5 years ago, And I've seen the data. I don't exactly remember the numbers, but I've seen data that shows that 5 years ago, when the top AI experts were asked, how far is artificial general intelligence?
Yeah.
Okay. How far are we from it? And of course, people have different opinions, but the average was about 20 something years from now. That was 5 years ago. Now you ask the same people and you get 5 to 10 years. So 5 years have passed, but we are 10 to 15 years closer to it. So that tells you that the pace of progress is accelerating. And I think that that's very promising, but also very alarming at the same time. So I don't know the answer to it. Here's a simple fact: the number of computer scientists working on AI and producing research in AI today is probably twice or thrice the number of 3 years ago. That is because AI, for a good reason, is garnering so much attention, so many resources, that just for that, like we now have so much more of our attention and resources, the best resources available intellectually to work on this, that you can imagine that whatever trajectory we were on just a few years ago, now we're on a new path because we are devoting far more resources to it.
Yeah. And the interest is also increasing day by day, right? So companies, funding, investors, the pool of talented people, everything is going to increase, right? With that.
1,000,000%. I mean, you went over a few unicorn startups that you think are promising, and I think there was several in the Gen AI space. So yeah, absolutely, a lot of money is flowing there. In fact, a year ago or so, we were prepared for a recession, right? So inflation was very high. The initial sort of boost from COVID ending was over, and the expectation was that America would plunge into a recession. And many economists believe that the reason this has not happened yet is all the excitement around AI, the billions of dollars that are flowing into the AI economy. And the AI economy, just to be clear, it's not just startups, it's not just Microsoft or Google investing in AI. You have corporations all across the spectrum who are now saying, hey, we want to do something that usually they don't do in recessions, and that is we want to invest in R&D. We want to implement more AI into our processes because this thing is opening new horizons for us. So I don't know if this will prevent us from a recession. I don't think it matters that much. But the point is, this is having an effect, a macro effect on the global economy, and not because of the job stuff. That still hasn't happened, just because of all the excitement that this is triggering.
I think we discussed on this podcast about the replacement of writers, right? Earlier.
Oh, the writers'
So,
strike, the writers'
yeah.
guild. Yeah, yeah.
So that means Gen AI is already replacing people, right? It has started taking their jobs, kind of. Is that true or not?
Well, I don't have exact data. I don't think it has yet replaced actors or writers. I think writers can use and are using Gen AI for sure, and that's cutting the amount of labor involved in producing a new show. One of the concerns is there are certain products that if you produce more of, more people will consume, and so the supply will grow, but the demand will grow together. Example, healthcare. Today in America, far more people would love to see a physician than the people who are seeing a physician. Why? Because it's expensive to see a physician.
Mhm.
Almost universally. Doesn't matter which insurance you have, it's never free in America, or it's almost never free. If you had twice as many appointments to doctors, assuming they were more affordable, they would be taken up. So it's not that there is too much or enough supply. Now, in industries where AI can increase the supply and the demand will catch up, there's no problem. So, for example, if AI can help doctors take twice as many appointments, let's say because there is less back end work to do by the doctors, doctors can service twice as many patients, and there will be twice as much demand because we know we need more healthcare than we're getting in America. There is more demand for it. With writers, people working on shows for Netflix and Hulu, if we had twice as many TV series, let's say, would you have twice as many eyeballs or twice as much time by people to watch all this content? I'm not so sure because, you need time to enjoy this content. Like, it's
Yeah.
not as if people don't have enough content already. In fact, most people that I talk to say, oh, if only I had more time, I would already be watching more content. So, for these jobs, very differently from healthcare, for instance, if these people, the writers, do their work in half the time, it's not clear that you would still occupy there will still be work for all of them. Like, even if they produce twice as many shows, maybe Netflix and Amazon will tell them, thank you very much, we don't need twice as many jobs, we just need half of as many of you, and we'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Job that can be digitized is like AI is kind of uh, getting after it, right? So I was just looking at like most of our jobs are kind of like knowledge work, and if there is a scope for AI to do better in that, they are doing it. So, like talking about writing, acting, because eventually acting is actually shown on a digital screen, right? It's not that there is like theater, live theater happening, and somebody's going and watching you. So, like AI can eventually, maybe not today, but I think eventually can do a good job of using existing material and then kind of
Yeah,
creating
digital
something
replicas, right?
derivative out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what the actors are worried about. They're saying we are granting the studios rights to use everything that we are being paid for. So they own the material. And today's contracts, they don't prevent the studios from using that to train their
Yeah,
own AI and create a digital replica of the same actor playing at a completely different scene
yeah,
without the human beings involvement in any of this. And theoretically they don't need to pay any royalty for that, because today's
Yeah,
contracts, they don't involve any provisions for what happens if AI reproduces you and
yeah,
the studio uses that for another creation.
yeah.
exactly. I think so. Have you guys seen any change in the workplace dynamics because of AI? Like, let's say there is an example. There is a like conflict between two, three different ideas, and someone comes along and says, "Hey, I checked with this particular AI, and out of these three options, this is the best option." And then suddenly he gets more consent to go with that idea, right? Like, it's a workplace dynamics question that I'm posing here. So how does that play out, right? Tomorrow, if there is a meeting and options are being discussed, what if someone opens up AI and asks that AI and then says, "Hey, we should have consensus on this particular thing only," right? And we don't know what is the authenticity of that AI, right? That's a opaque thing for us.
Yeah.
Have you seen that, Ankur? Have you faced
No,
scenario?
not yet. I would say. So I this is how I think about it, right? So anything objective, which mostly has an objective out output that we are expecting, I think nobody is going to disagree that let's ask AI or like search to like determine it for you. But when there is like more nuance that comes into play, there is some decision making that needs to happen, which is not straightforward. I don't think AI is like right now in a good like good enough state to like give you that decision making. So yeah, I have not seen that so far.
What about the chances of that being happening soon? There is
I'm
an
imagining, right? Like, I think you guys were talking about like what kind of jobs AI can take up. I was thinking that um, any job which requires more of a human aspect in terms of responding to you, right? So, for example, if you are talking to your manager and you want to discuss your career growth and you want that person to show empathy towards you, right? Or you are not having you are not feeling included in your team enough, right? I don't think AI can do a very good job of that. Like, if let's say imagine a system wherein like AI is your manager and AI is kind of responding to you, would you like that? Like I can say for myself that I wouldn't enjoy that. For very objective things, I would prefer.
I
Hey,
would say, Ankur,
yeah,
so I actually don't fully agree. I do think that AI can even do a good job at that. And I will refer you and the listeners to Pi. Pi stands for personal intelligence. It's the chatbot from Inflection AI. I think the
yeah,
URL is pi.ai.
yeah,
This is a chatbot. Unlike ChatGPT, Bard, and the others, it is super conversational. So it is just like your personal agent. It asks you how you're doing and so on. It has so much empathy that I was stunned. Like they designed it in such a way that if you wanted to vent about your workplace colleagues, whatever, like you could do it with Pi. I don't know what their privacy policy is, but in terms of the effectiveness, I think it exceeds most people that I've interacted with. It is incredible. So I do think AI is there. ChatGPT, people always talk about ChatGPT as if this is the only way to do generative AI. And sure, it's an interesting way to do it. It is far from the only way. There's so many ways to do it. And remember, some people have some very smart people have sworn that AI has developed consciousness just through their interactions with it. So they're not so stupid. I'm not saying that this is true. It is not true, but it can absolutely fool us into being just as empathetic as a human being.
yeah. I think we are uh, talking about two different things, right? What I am saying is the moment I know that I am being fooled, like I don't want to have the conversation, right? I always want for anything more human. I want to like connect with another human being, right? I don't know if I want to connect with an AI right now. I
Yeah.
don't feel like I want to connect with an AI. That AI is just like a tool for me. Hey, tell me about this particular thing, or teach me this particular thing, or give me a information about this particular thing, right? So similarly, I don't know like how much I would enjoy actually a AI written movie, AI acted movie versus knowing that okay, there is a real human being who is acting and a real human being who has written the story. They have felt something, and then based on that, they have actually written the story. So
Yeah. So this is in a way you could say some people say I will never purchase a handbag that was made on an assembly line. I only
Yeah,
want my
mm,
handbags to be handmade. Okay, and
handmade.
that's
Yeah.
cool. You have a market for that. And some people, will pay top dollar to get something that's handmade. They only want their carpet to be handmade, no matter the fact that they
Mhm.
can get a nice carpet for a tenth of the
yeah,
cost. Um, but I think where there is certainly a disruptive potential is for the 80% of the people who might be fine with an AI. They're not, as
yeah,
selective as you, Ankur. They're not as sensitive. And they would be like, what do I prefer? A boss that kind of sucks and is insensitive to my problems, or an AI boss that's perfect because it was trained based on the training sets of the best bosses? Sure, it's not a real person, but I would prefer this over the three previous bosses that I had. So I can see how companies would end up saying, it's not what the employee prefers. We're going to get you a wonderful AI boss. You can
yeah.
have one on ones with them whenever you want. They won't reschedule it because they are busy. And for most people, most of the time, that would be good enough.
Actually, yeah, I can see that world as well.
Yeah.
Maybe the world will be so efficient that you actually don't need a boss, you don't need a manager. Like everything is just super efficient, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
AI. And Ankur, when you said you don't like interacting with AI, you will prefer a human connect. I completely agree with that. But the thing is, only and only if you know whether it's a human connect or an AI connect. If
yeah,
that boundary, like you are just talking to a chat somewhere, right? You don't know if on the other side there is a human or not. I will give you a very good case, right? Support tickets. They will say we are connecting you to an agent. You don't know whether that agent is a human or an AI. And at this moment, currently, you will not be able to distinguish, right? If you are
yeah,
talking to a real human behind the computer or it's a AI bot that is talking to you.
That's a
So
really interesting thing because one of the things that governments, the EU, the US have been talking about, and I think if when regulation comes, this will be one of the first things, is a requirement for anyone I think who uses AI. We'll see how this ends up being the legislation around this. But I think one of the things will be if you are generating something by AI, you have to make it visible.
Yeah.
People should not confuse AI generated
yes,
content to human generated content.
means I think that is P0, right? And I will let's go back to the movie industry again. I think AI has been used in movie industries long back. All the backgrounds that you see, all the VFX that you see, it's not AI as in real generative AI, but lot of computer graphics have been used in that, right? And we are fooled into thinking like, oh, this situation happening in real life at this place, where it is happening in a some warehouse, some studio, right? And so I think it's an interesting thing, right? Like, by the way, Ankur, I completely agree with you when you said you don't want to talk to an AI. I play a lot of chess, and chess has two modes: either you can compete with another person or you can play with a computer. I never play with a computer because I know what is the end result in that.
Hmm.
uh, I prefer to play with another human. If I lose, if I win, it's an excitement, it's a journey over there, right?
Yeah.
So I think I agree on that aspect, that we don't want to connect to AI, but I am also worried whether we will be knowing whether we are connecting to an AI or a human.
Yeah, well, chess is such an interesting example because arguably 20 years ago, computers exceeded uh, humanity
Yeah.
in their abilities, right? Deep Blue, I think, was in
Yeah.
Yeah.
1996 or something. That's when Kasparov lost to an IBM computer. And since then, we all know that we stand no chance against chess. And later,
Exactly.
Go came along, and AI proved to be stronger than people at Go as well. But you now have this resurgence of chess because we sort of came to accept that AI is in its own league. We're not playing against AI. We're going to celebrate our humanity and just play against things like us. Maybe we train with an AI who's
Yes.
at our level artificially just to practice, but generally we enjoy doing the same old things between us people. But do you think this is how it's going to end up being, let's say, across other things? So, for instance, there will be art for AI. The AI generated art will be the best and most innovative, but we humans will have our own human art, and you will have two camps. The camp of
Yeah.
people who go to see art made by humans, and maybe the majority would be happy to look at paintings made by AI.
I think that's what Ankur was coming through, right? He said he wants to have more human connect, and definitely people will love to go into those art galleries or connect with those markets, and yeah, maybe appreciate if another human is doing something, they will appreciate it, right? So cool.
Yeah, the art is actually a very interesting example because the I actually use AI generated art a lot, especially for like podcast generating the thumbnails for our podcast using Mid Journey, and it's a mind blowing technology. Like you give a prompt and like almost in real time, it gives you a pretty amazing image. Um, but I don't know if I will value it as much as like seeing a Van Gogh painting in a museum, right? Or forget about even Van Gogh, right? Like
Yeah.
a really well painted oil painting by like somebody, right? Like because I know that for a human to do it, it's very difficult. You need to gain mastery of brush strokes, understanding colors, understanding what human beings like, and putting your some human feeling into it, which AI does not have, right? AI is more of like there's a lot of plagiarism, if I can use that word, in how like an image or a code or a piece of text is generated. And I think the moment we hear about plagiarism, we kind of have a visceral reaction that okay, this is this is this is not to be admired. Like not the technology behind it, but the output that is being generated, right? So that's how I kind of feel about it, especially about. And then you have so much art, right? Like AI can generate, like, I don't know, like years of art for you in just one day,
Yeah.
right? So the moment you have like abundance of something, the value of that goes down. Like scarcity increases
Mhm.
value, right? Or difficulty to do something increases value. So uh, I think there will be just abundance of content in the world very soon, and the value of that content is going to go down.
I think with that, I will love to have a discussion on what are the potential risks that we face in this, right? We are all excited about Gen AI. So, Eden, how do you think the risk factor plays in here, right? Is it a risk to the job market, economy, or as in a whole society?
So yeah, we talked about job displacement. That's a major risk.
Mhm.
Um, if you look historically, new technologies always disrupt some jobs. But what happened in the last century, since the Industrial Revolution, really, is we lost jobs with every wave of automation or technological breakthrough, but new jobs emerged. And sometimes the new jobs had nothing to do with the old jobs, but new jobs were created. This could happen here as well. Okay, so we're already seeing a job called the prompt engineer. That's one example. But the main question is not whether new jobs will be created. Of course, new jobs will be created. The main question is, will we create enough new jobs to replace the jobs that are lost? Nobody has an answer to that. Another interesting question, and every question carries a risk, because if the answer is not what we want, that's a risk. So we said one thing about the number, the quantity of jobs, that could be a risk. The other risk could be, can we retrain the people who lose their jobs? If we can't retrain these people, what happens to the millions who lose their jobs? Do they become useless people? Do we find a way to reintegrate them into the economy? When people in the Midwest lost their factory jobs, in theory, they could have gone to work for Walmart and McDonald's, and some did, but a lot decided never to go back to work. And we could be facing this. So even if there are new jobs, it doesn't mean that the people who lose their jobs will want to take the available or existing jobs. So that's a second risk. Another one is the business models of many industries could be disrupted quite massively. So remember the music industry, they used to sell records and CDs. Now their profits are very low compared to where they were because of the streaming services that brought down the revenue in the industry altogether. Same thing with bookstores. Bookstores used to be a big thing. Now they're no
Yeah.
longer. Once upon a time, portrait painters were, that was a profession. People would,
Yeah.
you would invite them.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us experienced that, but a family would pay someone to spend 3 days and create a painting of them. That went away. So many business models in various industries could just become unnecessary because
Hmm.
this disruption factor. So it could be not just bad for employees, but it could be bad for many businesses who are not ready for this. Um, and the last thing I'll mention, but there are more risks, is the battlefield. So in defense, one thing that seems unstoppable is the use of lethal autonomous weapons.
Hmm.
That's the idea that you need to react quickly in the battlefield. You need to react quickly if a cruise missile is on its way to your capital city. And humans are not as quick as AI. And definitely, if they need to deal with a lot of data quickly and produce a rational decision, they're not going to do it as well as AI. So you can imagine how different powers across the world will implement more and more AI to make snap decisions. But snap decisions can be very destabilizing because, I mean, you've seen stock market crashes, for
Mhm.
example. That happens with algorithmic trading, where before a human understands what happens, the market tanked 20%. So
Yeah.
financial markets are one thing, but the defense of countries is a totally different thing. And if you have these, start having these feedback loops where America does X, so the Chinese AI does Y, and then the American AI does Z, and all of a sudden there are 50 nukes flying over our countries. I mean, that is never right.
Yeah,
I will add
that
a
is.
Yeah, I would like to add a couple of things to whatever Eden you said. I think computer security is going to be a challenge. It's already a
Mhm.
challenge today, but like finding vulnerabilities in code bases
Cybersecurity, yeah.
will be like super easy. Hopefully that the AI helps us also in preventing or like stopping those
Mhm.
vulnerabilities. And I will also say impersonation, right? Given that like just this podcast, we are putting our videos on the internet. There have been like many episodes where we have put our videos. There are a lot of pictures on the internet, and impersonation will be a thing wherein like your entire videos or your voice could be replicated and you could be saying totally different things. So that that is probably already happening. So that there will be like a proliferation of those kind of impersonation and fraud. um, yeah, I would say those are the two additional things that came to my mind. Vishal, what
Yeah,
do you
so
think?
I will add couple of things here. I think most, yeah, you have covered most of them, but very short term impact that we are going to see is reduction in pay, right? Because the productivity is going to increase, right? uh, you are not going to get that same higher compensations going forward, right? Because companies will quickly identify that I don't need the smartest developer or the smartest person on in the room, right? I just need a person who can work with this particular AI that I have, and it will automatically take care of producing the same result, right? So now the people who were having high paying jobs, they are at risk for sure, right? That is one thing, right? The other thing is creation of new jobs, right? That is going to be drastically impacted because you have a tool which can almost replicate someone in person, right? And you don't want to hire more people now. You will probably invest more in hiring these kind of tools, right? Where you don't have to worry about their insurance, you don't have to worry about the leaves that they take. Yeah, there are so many things, right? You don't have to worry about that, right? So companies are quickly going to identify that. They will say, instead of investing in this particular area, I'm going to invest in making sure I have AI which can do the same job with less people. So new job creation is going to be the problem. So these are the two major things short term that I see. Long term, I think Eden has covered beautifully here. The business models are going to change. I think, by the way, Eden, Chegg is one of the companies. It was a tutoring company.
Yeah.
Its stock dropped around 70%, 80% in one day.
Amazing
The reason,
example. Absolutely. And we see the ones that are preparing, like Khan
yeah,
Academy. That's an
ex-
example of an actor that identified the Gen AI wave, got on it very, very quickly, and
yes,
now they are remodeling what their, it's not a business, but what that nonprofit does by
yeah.
using Gen AI to turbocharge the power of online remote learning.
Exactly. Like, think of that, right? Like, instead of hiring a in-person tutor now, Khan Academy is gonna create this AI which is gonna replace multiple jobs in tutoring section, right? So in future, those tutors who would have done this job, now AI will do their job, right? I'm pretty sure the other people who would have been hired, they might have prepared and they would have changed their career, but in reality those jobs were replaced. That's how I see it, right? AI will definitely create new jobs. We don't know the scope of that or how many new jobs they will create,
Can
but
you can you guys speculate on what kind of new jobs would be created by AI, or if somebody has to like pivot their career to
okay,
like bulletproof for the next like 5 years or 10 years, what kind of
yeah,
jobs are we talking about?
Well, so one thing we didn't mention, and I think we have to keep this in mind, Gen AI still has a huge problem of what we colloquially refer to as hallucinations. It is
hmm,
not very credible. There is a lot of research going into it, but nobody can say for sure that we know how to prevent hallucinations. As long as hallucinations are an issue, two things I think are worth bearing in mind. One is that in critical areas where accuracy matters, unless you are significantly more or as reliable as an expert, a human expert,
Yeah.
there will not be a shift to AI. So take self-driving cars, for instance. We already have self-driving cars that do a very good job, but with self-driving, it's not enough to be good 99.9% of the time. You have to be good like 100% minus an alpha that's
Hmm.
extremely small.
Yeah.
Um, and that it turns out that that very last bit of improvement, as is often is the case, is exponentially hard to get because the
Hmm.
corner
Yes.
cases are very hard to train for.
Hmm.
So in expert systems and areas where you really cannot afford to make a mistake, mission critical operations, at the very least you will still have a human in the loop. So maybe an AI
Hmm.
analyzes, but you will have a human pressing the button. So in terms of how do you skill yourself to be relevant for AI, one thing is to be an expert in something,
Hmm.
in areas where the expert will be the decision maker no matter what, because the AI is not trustworthy.
Hmm.
um, but going back to something I think that you said, Ankur, at the end of the day, there are a lot of professions where by definition people want a human. So think of therapy. Okay, I mean there's so many examples in therapy where part of the therapy isn't just the diagnosis and writing a report. The main thing is somebody wants an empathetic
Exactly.
healthcare professional to be with them. I'm not sure how well Pi.ai will be at telling somebody that they have
Yeah.
pancreatic cancer. You do need a human face and body attached to it. So there's still a lot of jobs where we want a human to do that job, even if an AI in theory can do it better.
What do you think, Vishal?
Yeah, I think so. There are a couple of things when you said what kind of jobs will be created, right? Um, I think first of all, fine tuning AI itself, right? That is something that in short term, in next 2 3 years, right? I think fine tuning AI models is going to take over, right? And security of AI, right? That is one of the things that I, in short term, I think people, yeah, like there will be a lot of new jobs, right? That will be created. Testing of AI, that is one of the piece that I think is so critical. I think me and Ankur have discussed this a little bit earlier. How do you test an AI, right? How do you validate the like the model that you have written, the model that has been produced, how good it is, right? There are a couple of these jobs that will be created, right? Prompt engineering is one of them that we have seen, right? uh, but there are some jobs that I think AI will not be able to replace. Those are like a sports athlete, right? I think it is very hard to replace a sports athlete with an AI. It's, I think, practically not possible, right? Because it's not a, as you say, right, Ankur, moving atoms, moving bits, right? So an athlete is moving atoms kind of like thing, right? Over there. You can train with AI, as we discussed. You can have a chess trainer for you to train you on a chess game, but eventually you are going to play in the tournaments, you are going to represent your country, or however the format of the game or the sports is. So I think that is one thing that will not be replaced so easily. I don't see it coming in future also.
So basically, like physical world, right? Like things done in the physical world, like a gym trainer. Like I don't think you can replace a gym trainer. I think those
Yes.
kind of jobs will be, or a chef, right? Who,
If you, yeah, if you love to have those kind of
yeah.
experiences where you want a chef to cook for you, right? I think AI will help that chef to do some particular things, but eventually that chef is going to drive the whole thing and make that experience life for us, right? So I
Uh, Jobs that help others find meaning in life. I think slowly, like we are losing human connection. We are spending a lot of time in front of screens. Our kids are also doing that. So like jobs which help you kind of connect with other humans. So self and relationship counseling, I think Eden kind of touched on a similar aspect. Physical and mental wellness help, so like gym trainers, or like helping you like feel well in terms of your mental stability, happiness. I think specialized work will be in demand. So I think the 90th percentile of work, like which is like people with like good skill sets in the knowledge economy, I think a lot of those will be replaced. But the 99th percentile or 99.9 percentile kind of work, right, like super specialized experts, those will like continue to be in demand. But I think AI will also change the definition of good and specialized or excellent, because AI will keep like learning and getting better. So like what good looks like today may not be good tomorrow. What excellent looks like today may not be excellent. So
Yeah.
I think we'll constantly get challenged by AI in the knowledge workspace. But honestly, I don't have any idea as to what will be the new type of work in the future, right? Yeah, like prompt engineering is what I hear about, but I don't have like a lot of clarity around what does like the new sets of jobs in 2033 look like.
10 years from now. Yeah. You think there will be some sort of industries that will be completely closed because of AI? I will tell you why I'm asking this, right? One is, do you know there was a job called typewriter, kind of, right? I think there are no more typewriters, right? People now, everything is digitized. I will tell you, STD booths, right? Telephone operators. It was a job 10, 15 years ago. Nowadays, nobody has those kind of telephone operator jobs, right? Because everyone has a very smart device in their hand, and that whole industry is gone, right? Telephone operator uh, work, right? So do you think any sort of industries that you think will completely go?
Well, the typewriter, actually, that's a pretty interesting story because when it first hit the market in the 1800s, everyone thought that you would no longer need, I guess, secretaries, because the thinking was a secretary's job was to record memos and notes, take notes basically. And every manager needed a secretary to do that work. But once the typewriter is there, the manager can do it, the typewriter can be at their desk, and you wouldn't need the secretary. But what ended up happening is exactly the opposite. The secretaries at first used the typewriters. Now they could produce many more documents and reports. So you needed more secretaries thanks to the emergence of these typewriters. So the opposite effect happened. I don't think this necessarily has to happen with generative AI, but I'm saying this to just sort of drive the point that it is very hard to predict how jobs will be influenced by new technologies. Sometimes the fact that there is new technology generates more demand, and as a result, now you need more employees to fulfill the demand. So this could be, and I think what we will see across industries is very uneven. So some industries will grow and hire more people because Gen AI is there, and other industries might begin to disappear. And I think everybody has a responsibility to themselves and their families to look at where they are,
Yeah.
their profession and industry, and try to think, how is this going to play out in my industry over the next few years? Is this the right industry to stay in? Maybe now is the time to reskill and retrain.
Reskill. Have any tips and tricks for reskilling?
Well, a few maybe. So, one thing I would say is definitely don't fear generative technologies. In fact, adopt them. The quicker you adopt them, the more comfortable you are with different AI tools, the more productive you're going to be, the more value you will have in the marketplace. So, play with things that deal with media creation, note taking, meeting assistants, summarizers, schedulers. transcription tools. Like, be familiar, everyone really, be familiar with all these tools, see how you can use them in your personal life so that you become um, you integrate them into your life, and then you can integrate them into the workplace. Expertise is another. We talked about that. Like, be an
Mhm.
expert on something, especially areas where critical thinking are important, because the AI, as we said, isn't always very truthful. Being able to automate things in your jobs, in other processes at your company is important. It's not exactly reskilling, but the ability to understand how to automate things is an important skill to have. We talked about writing good prompts. That is a skill that's pretty easy to pick up. You could take
Mhm.
a course, an online course in prompt engineering. You'll become better at using AI. And diversification, I think, is the last thing. So think
Mm.
about, do I have some kind of hobby that maybe with AI I can turn into a secondary income stream? So maybe you love golfing. Now, thanks to Gen AI, maybe you can easily write a blog about golfing. Maybe you can easily have a podcast about golfing. Then you start monetizing on it and stuff like that. So I think that that's a new opportunity that Gen AI opens, turning a hobby into a business.
Nice.
That's
Yeah,
very beautifully said, actually. Yeah.
that is amazing, Eden. I loved the tips that you gave.
Well, I'm sure you're using a lot of Gen AI to produce this podcast. So you're practicing already.
Yeah.
Awesome. Eden, do you want to talk a little bit about how do you keep yourself up to date on generative AI, but in general, in terms of tech or product management? Do you have any resources to share for our listeners?
I think definitely, make sure to read a lot. There is a ton of content out there. Find the ones that you think fit your style. Like, if you want more details, maybe a few blog posts are the right places. If you want the headlines, maybe go to some news aggregators and search by topic. So that's one thing. I open every morning over breakfast, reading through the latest news as it relates to the areas that I'm interested in, especially AI safety. So that's one thing. Archive is a wonderful resource. That's where all the latest research is published on every type of topic, not only tech. It's a good resource because that's where things get published, so you can get the latest and greatest there. You can use AI chatbots to research a topic, and I do that quite a lot, but you need to feed them with the latest materials. So, I'm not going to name names, but various chatbots let you, for instance, interrogate them about a PDF, for instance. That I find useful. And more than anything, that's something that AI can't really do for now. Talk to other human beings and be sure to connect to people across your network, your company, your community, and so on.
Awesome.
I think one issue that I have seen with AI is the information that AI has is always little bit older. I will say either 6 months or a year. So they don't have the latest, like last 2 days, 3 days information, right? So that is something that keeps me off using it in current context. But in general, if you see, right, if you are asking AI to help you in some subject, right? So AI has vast amount of knowledge in that subject, and it will definitely filter out information for you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this podcast. And thank you, Eden, for joining us. This discussion was super insightful for all of us and hopefully for our listeners as well. Do you want to plug anything? Feel free to do so.
Well, I'll add one thing in terms of how to keep up, and you've done it, so
Yeah.
kudos for that. Events like Google I/O, shameless
Mhm.
plug, are a wonderful way to keep up with what's happening in this space. And of course, Google is not the only one, but Google is one of a few companies like Microsoft that are hell-bent on delivering some of the best and greatest abilities with AI throughout their product portfolio. So I think this is a wonderful way to stay up to date and see what the big guys are bringing to the fore with AI. So that's another suggestion.
Awesome.
Cool.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Eden,
Yeah,
for joining us. And we'll talk to all of you in the next one. Bye bye.
sure. Thank you, everyone. Bye.